The business began in the fall of 1949 when Bob was working at Desert House of Crafts in Tucson.
I was just a child when we first came to Globe, but while you're here you can look at some of my favorite displays. That would be the Indian display and the desert with the quail and roadrunners. We know you're going to enjoy our exhibit.
Thank you for coming.
Goodbye.
I'm Tom Foster, Executive Director of Bullion Plaza Cultural Center and Museum. You are joining me here today. We're at the far northwest corner of the building, right on the edge of the McKusick tile exhibit, and we'd like to show you a little bit of what we have to offer with McKusick tiles. And also, we would like to introduce you to Kathleen McKusick. She is waiting for me inside the exhibit, so if you want to follow me, we can go there. Good morning. We're here in the McKusick tile exhibit with Kathleen McKusick, and we're going to talk a little bit about the tiles and the exhibit itself.
Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Kathleen. How are you? It's so good to see you. It's been quite a while. So one of the things that we want to talk about first here, one of the things that's always interested me, are the tiles that the McKusicks did in Braille. So we have two examples here of the tiles that McKusick's did in Braille. One is fired without any color on it, and the other one is fired and is actually finished tile with color. So Kathleen, give us a little bit of information.
These were done for PAW, P-A-W, and has a paw on the tile. And they were, I think PAW was in Eagle, Colorado, and doing a display of Braille for people that couldn't see, where they could feel the tile. And there's little bumps, which were very challenging to do.
Can only imagine,
yeah, and my mother had to put back some of the dots after the clay came out of the mold, and then the dots would stick in the mold, so she had to put some of the Braille dots back. And this is a columbine flower, and it's a raised surface on the tile. This tile was fired once, and it would be glazed and fired a second time, and then a third time for if there were any red on it.
You know, one of the interesting things about McKusick tiles, and that's one of the things that's always fascinated me, because cartouches go back into the time of the Egyptians and before. So each tile on the back, it's hard to see here, each tile on the back is marked with a McKusick stamp or cartouche. So it identifies the tile to anybody that's concerned, is this really a McKusick tile? Turn it over, it's always stamped. I don't think there's an instance I remember where it wasn't stamped on the back. Do you?
No. This stamp is a map of the United States, and it says Globe on it, and that's in case someone found the tile ever, like in the future, then they would know the place that the tile had been made. And the clay and the tile and the glaze were all made outside of Globe in Kellner Canyon. And we often had a joke about the California, in case it fell in the ocean, it would mess up my dad's map stamp. And then it has the date up here. Sometimes there's a date down at the bottom.
I've seen that on the sides.
And then it often had a count on the tiles, but not that many tiles. The end number, if it said one of 300 or something. Some of the designs, like these later designs, there weren't any 300, there may have been 5.
So Kathleen, since we're on the topic of cartouches and stamps, I'd like to go over to this other case. and we can look closely at some of the stamps that they use. So
Sounds good.
let's go. Okay, Kathleen, we're over here at the Stamp in Cartouche exhibit case. And these are all the stamps, cartouches that were used to identify tiles as McKusick. So maybe give us a little bit of information on these.
These stamps are made out of clay. He carved carved the words into a mold, and then he pressed the little ball of clay onto the mold and then made it square. And then when it started to dry, he lifted it out gently so it would retain the letters, sort of like with the paw braille where the raised surface is. And it was a tricky thing to do. And then he took the flat section with the wording and then made a little clay handle and slipped them together with wet clay, and then ended up with a stamp that he dried. And he did different ones. He did McKusick handmade tiles. He did his map of the western part of the United States with Globe, Arizona. And then he had some for Gila Pottery, which was an earlier tile studio of theirs. And then he even did, when Halley's Comet was born and came, and my son was born, he did Halley's Comet, and he stamped my son's handprints and footprints, Terry Condit, which was hysterical. So he was always documenting things with his stamps. And they're very similar to wax seals that they use to seal letters with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The kings and queens of Europe. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Mm-hmm. Now, this is one of my favorite exhibits. I really enjoy this.
And yeah, the top one has a little stamp that he pressed into the tile, and that was to put in little holders for the tiles, some of the later tiles.
Oh,
like
that's
in the 1990s, it's that little metal part. And the copper shop made him the different shapes, and often they were copper.
Okay, yeah, that I didn't know. I wondered about that, so that's good information.
It's so that the little metal shape could go onto the back of the tile, glued on, and then the cork could go over the top, and then you could hang the tile onto a little nail or a screw.
Yeah, neat. Well, thanks. So let's move on to a couple other areas here in the exhibit. We can talk more about the things that are here on display. So, Kathleen, we're standing here in front of another exhibit case. This is primarily the molds for the different tiles. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Up top are Moorish designs, and there's a blank mold that the tile was pressed into and then flipped out of gently and allowed to dry. And then there's a tile in this other mold which shows the once fired tile which had come from that mold. And then that is a block mold that was used for the other side of two molds that fit together.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And yeah, there's one that the tile's pressed into, and then that is a blank mold that just went between tiles. It made a tile that went between tiles that didn't have a design on them. For example, if somebody was building into their house, then they'd want to space the different tiles. So there'd be a tile, a spacer, a tile. That's why that one doesn't have any carving in it. This one is a cottontail rabbit leaping. That's the block part of that mold. It's the master, basically. This is a horse. Same thing, and then there would have been another mold that fit to it, and then that would have the carved out part. So from these molds, he could make other molds, cast separate plaster or Paris molds.
So you're basically doing a positive and a negative.
Yes.
To give you your final product.
2/2 of a clamshell.
So a couple other things here that are sort of interesting. Of course, The scale here, I'm sure, was used to weigh clay.
Yes, and pigments, and usually powdered pigments. This stone has copper carbonate, and that would have been ground up and then in a grinder, and then the powder would have been used to make the glazes, especially the greens and a little of the blues.
So the mortar and pestle at the bottom then basically was used for grinding.
Yeah. To grind, just hitting. Often a small grinder would be used, then it would be refined inside with the grinder.
So brought to a finer powder. Okay, well, good. So, well, let's walk on to the next exhibit, talk a little bit more about that.
Good.
Thanks, Kathleen. Okay, so we're over here in the exhibit, in the area where most of the equipment and machinery was used to manufacture the clay and manufacture the tile. So Kathleen, give us a little information on what we're seeing here.
This is a clay slip, ground up clay that's with lots of water, a mixer to mix the clay to pour into some molds that he used to cast or floor tile. And they would then dry in the molds for a few days, and then he'd pop them out.
And one of the fun things on this piece of equipment is the car transmission they used.
Yes.
So you can see up here that...
Yes, and a big barrel.
Yeah, 55 gallon
Barrel.
Steel
Yeah.
barrel.
It's what he had in the time period of the 50s and 60s.
And you know, when you come from the desert and from mining communities, everything that was left over was used again.
Yes, and then Phoenix was too far away.
At that time.
And we used to have to, when we drive over Superior, then you'd have to put a water bag on the side of your car to cool your radiator.
Right.
In that time period.
I remember.
So, and it was the same with the clay. He had to dig clay because the cost of shipping clay was way beyond from Phoenix or anywhere, from California usually, Laguna clay and things. So he had to have his own clay mine basically, and then start from scratch with it in rocks, and then grind it and fish out bullets and copper bullets and things, because they would make green spots in the glaze on the white background glaze. Yeah.
Interesting.
And this is his potter's wheel with a section where you put the pot, put the ball of clay, and then turn it into a plate or a bowl or a vase or a coffee mug. And then the sponges to hold on the side and smooth the surface.
You can see on this wheel that they used an automobile crankshaft as part of the vertical mechanism.
Filled it with cement, I think.
Yeah.
Parts of it.
So, yeah, everything was adapted.
Jerry-rigged.
Jerry-rigged, yeah, to make do, because things were too far away and too expensive. So Kathleen, this is probably the last station we're going to stop at this exhibit. This was one of the more important stations in the process, so maybe tell us a little bit about what happened here.
That is my mother's, from the kitchen, about 1963 refrigerator, which seemed quite large when I was a child. It looks small now. But in it is balls in plastic of tile making clay, and they just stayed in a refrigerator. He eventually put that into the shop, and when she replaced her refrigerator, it had a door on it, kept it cold. And then at the table, there's molds for hand pressing tile clay into the molds, and then a kill shelf for the dried tiles to be fired. They go from gray when they dry to reddish brown when they're fired the first time. And then they're eventually were decorated by mostly my mother. And with the syringe, the yellow mustard container syringe, usually French's mustard, and it has a little spigot on the end of the top, and then she'd squeeze the translucent white glaze around the pattern on the back of around the surface of the front surface of the tile to fill in the background. And then some colors were painted in, like reds, with the Chinese paint brushes for their third firing after they came out of the kilns the second time.
What are some of the jars down here, Kip?
They are the glazes. My dad made his own glazes because you couldn't easily get them from Phoenix. California is where most of the tile making things. The shipping was so expensive. And they are different pigments like what we showed you in the other area where they'd be ground up. And then certain percentages like a baking mix would be created in the glaze to make each color glaze. And this is like a pig javelina color. And then this is a translucent background for the white that she used in the syringe. And then there's yellow for when she needed yellow, different colors.
They used some of the minerals in the area, didn't
Yes.
they, to grind? Yeah.
They did.
So I think the irons were more the black, and
Yes.
the reds are
Yes.
more hematite.
Yes. And then the copper carbonate, like the color of the chair, were used for greens.
Okay.
Now you would just buy your glazes.
Yeah. But back then, and we're a mineral-rich area, so
Yes,
there was a
we're
lot
in
to
a
draw
rich
from.
area. Goes with mining.
Well, okay, that sounds good. Let's go ahead and go to the last case here,
Sounds good.
and then we'll go on from there. Thank you. Okay, Kathleen, this is the last exhibit case we're going to review today. And this is neat because it has local history with the Arboretum. So you might tell us a little bit about what's in this case.
In this case is the black swallowtail tile, the butterfly, and then there's also a group of 4 different butterflies, local area, like near Superior and Globe. There's, from their pond at the Arboretum, the dragonflies with their glistening wings. Those took 4 firings of the tile because of the special glittery wings. Has to go very low temperatures. The red-tailed hawk with its nest. And these are all animals that are at the Boyce Thompson Arboretum. The pocket mouse and the different gray squirrels, and then the coyotes howling, and the white-winged doves, and saguaro cactus tops that they live on. Everything has the environment with the prickly pear, the hedgehogs, the saguaro cactus in this area and down at the Arboretum. Many regional zones cross, so you get a lot of different plants. And in Kellner, I think there's 4 to 6 zones that cross. So you get low pine because it's in the foothills of the Pinnells. And then you get the cactus. And then you get the riparian woodland with sycamores. And so some of the trees will have sycamore leaves and some will have different environmental plants for the animals. And then there's the horned-toed lizard, which runs flat on the ground, sort of fat. And then the different types of lizards, the earless lizard and their rocks, and then the yuccas around them. And the whiptail lizards and the types that dart in front of your feet as you're walking. The western fence lizards, they're overly friendly and you have to watch you don't step on them. And then there's Apache ladies gathering saguaro fruit with their long poles and their tired horse. Very tired. And then prickly pear too. And the Gila monster, with its yellow rabbit brush around it and the different rocks, it's sort of camouflaged. The desert spiny lizard, which run real fast and run up walls and trees. And the chuckawalla, they're impressive. And the tarantulas that come out right before monsoon. The raccoons that come out at night and wash their food with a little crawfish. The leopard frogs that come out like about February or so, and you hear them. Yeah, depending if it's a warm February. And the pond slider turtles that are at the pond. And then the crayfish. And then black rattlesnakes and western diamondbacks, and you have to watch where you walk. And then the garter snake on a branch where it obviously got in some water, maybe after a monsoon, and is hanging on to the branch that's floating in the water.
So most of these are still on display at Boyce Thompson,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So any of these that you want to see close up down there,
They'd be there.
you can go down to Boyce Thompson and
Around the pond.
I've seen them still out there, so it's really neat. McKusick's had a far reach, so they were known all over Arizona and the Southwest, and of course all over the world. So the exhibit we have here is really important to the community and to everyone else, and we're lucky that it's been able to find a home here at Boyan Plaza. Yeah, and thank you for that. So I think on that we should probably wrap this for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, and then we'll see what we can do for later on as we improve the exhibit and add things. We'll bring you back so you can see some of the improvements that we've done. So thanks for taking the time to watch this video, and we'll see you again on the other side. Thank you.